Miles Davis was dying. The doctors had given him 72 hours, maybe less. But as he lay in that hospital bed at St. John's Medical Center in Santa Monica, California, on September 26, 1991, with morphine dripping into his veins and machines monitoring his failing organs, he did something that shocked the nurses. He asked for his trumpet. What he discovered in those final hours and what he did next created one of the most legendary recording sessions in music history. The pneumonia had spread to both lungs. The stroke had weakened his left side. His liver was failing. His kidneys were shutting down, and his heart was barely pumping. Miles Davis, the man who'd revolutionized jazz 5 different times, who'd played with everyone from Charlie Parker to Prince, was at the end. The doctors had told his family to say their goodbyes. But Miles Davis had never done what doctors told him to do, and he wasn't about to start now. His nephew, Vincent Wilburn Jr., was sitting beside the hospital bed when Miles opened his eyes. It was 3 a.m, and Vincent had dozed off in the uncomfortable vinyl chair. Miles's raspy voice, weakened by illness but still commanding, cut through the silence. "Vincent, wake up." Vincent jerked awake, immediately alert. "Uncle Miles, you need something? Should I call the nurse?" "No, get my trumpet." Vincent looked confused. "Your trumpet? Uncle Miles, I know where I am," Miles interrupted, his words coming slowly but clearly. "I know what's happening to me, but I need my trumpet, now. The doctors said you need to rest. They said any exertion could—" Miles fixed his nephew with those dark, intense eyes that had intimidated musicians for 40 years. "Vincent, I've been resting for 3 days, and you know what I realized? I'm not going to rest my way out of this. This is it, and I'll be damned if I spend my last days in this bed without my horn." Vincent wanted to argue, but he knew that look. It was the same look Miles got before he completely changed the direction of jazz, the look that said arguing was pointless because the decision was already made. "It's at your house in Malibu," Vincent said quietly. "Then go get it," Miles rasped, "and bring manuscript paper, the good kind, and a pen." "Uncle Miles, it's 3 a.m. "Then you better hurry so you can get back before the morning shift comes and tries to stop me." Vincent left the hospital and drove through the empty Los Angeles streets to Miles's beach house in Malibu. He let himself in with the spare key and found Miles's trumpet exactly where it always was, on the piano, polished and ready. Vincent also grabbed a stack of manuscript paper from Miles's study and drove back to the hospital. When he returned to the room at 4:30 a.m., he found Miles sitting up in bed, which should have been impossible given how weak he was. The morphine drip was still connected, but Miles had somehow managed to prop himself up against the pillows. "Good," Miles said when Vincent handed him the trumpet case. "Now help me with this IV. I need my left hand free." "Uncle Miles, if you disconnect the IV, the alarms will go off. The nurses will come." Miles smiled slightly. "Then we better work fast." What happened over the next 45 minutes would become one of those stories that sounds too perfect to be true, except that Vincent Wilburn Jr. was there to witness every moment of it. Miles put the trumpet to his lips. His hands were shaking from the illness and the medication, and at first, no sound came out. He tried again, and this time a single note emerged, weak, breathy, nothing like the powerful tone Miles was famous for. But Miles wasn't trying to play powerfully. He was listening to something in his head, something he'd been hearing in the fog of morphine and dying, something that he needed to get out before it disappeared along with everything else. He played another note, then another. A melody was forming, slow and haunting, unlike anything Vincent had heard his uncle play before. It wasn't bebop, or fusion, or cool jazz, or any of the styles Miles had pioneered. It was something new, or maybe it was something ancient, something that had been waiting for this exact moment to be discovered. Miles played the melody 3 times through, each time a little clearer, a little more defined. Then he lowered the trumpet and looked at Vincent with an expression of pure urgency. "Write this down," Miles said, "exactly as I play it." Vincent grabbed the manuscript paper and pen. Miles played the melody again, slowly this time, pausing between phrases so Vincent could notate each note. It took 20 minutes to get it all down on paper. When they finished, Miles took the manuscript and stared at it for a long moment. "This is it," he said quietly. "This is what?" Vincent asked. "This is the thing I've been looking for my whole life, the perfect melody, the one that says everything without saying anything. Do you understand?" Vincent didn't, but he nodded anyway. "I need to record this," Miles said, and there was a desperation in his voice that Vincent had never heard before. Today, now, before, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "Uncle Miles, you can't leave the hospital. The doctors said I'm dying," Miles interrupted. "And they're right. I am dying. But I'm not dead yet, and I need to record this before I am. Can you help me with that, or do I need to do this myself?" Vincent looked at his uncle, 65 years old and dying, sitting in a hospital bed with a trumpet in his lap and fire in his eyes. And he realized that some people don't get to have peaceful deaths. Some people have to create until the very last moment because that's who they are. "What do you need me to do?" Vincent asked. "Call the studio. Tell them to get a session ready. Call the band, whoever's in town. Tell them it's urgent. Then help me get out of here. Uncle Miles, if you leave against medical advice, I'll die doing what I love instead of dying in this bed waiting for the end. Now are you going to help me or not?" Vincent helped. At 6 a.m. while the hospital was between shifts, Vincent helped Miles disconnect the IV, put on clothes over his hospital gown, and walk slowly out of the room. They made it to the parking garage before anyone noticed they were gone. By the time the hospital realized Miles Davis had checked himself out AMA, against medical advice, he was already in the car heading to Capitol Studios in Hollywood. Vincent had made the calls from the hospital parking lot. The studio engineer, Joe Zawinul, had been confused but agreed to open the studio at 7 a.m. Pianist Herbie Hancock was in LA and said he'd be there. Bassist Ron Carter was on a red-eye from New York, but would arrive by noon. Drummer Tony Williams was in San Francisco, but started driving immediately. The hardest call was to Miles' doctor, Dr. Samuel Harrison, who'd been treating Miles for years. "He did what?" Dr. Harrison shouted into the phone when Vincent explained what had happened. "He left the hospital to record," Vincent repeated. "Vincent, your uncle is dying. He has days, maybe hours. He needs to be in the hospital where we can keep him comfortable." "With respect, doctor, my uncle doesn't want to be comfortable. He wants to play." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Dr. Harrison sighed deeply. "Tell him I'll meet him at the studio. I'll bring portable oxygen and emergency medications. But Vincent, you understand that what he's doing is probably going to kill him faster, right?" "I understand," Vincent said, "but he's going to die anyway. At least this way, he gets to choose how." Miles and Vincent arrived at Capitol Studios at 7:15 a.m. Joe Zawinul was waiting outside, looking concerned and confused. "Miles," Joe said as Vincent helped Miles out of the car, "you look terrible. Should I be dying in a hospital bed, or should I be making music?" Miles interrupted in that raspy voice. "Those are the only 2 options, Joe. I picked this one. Now can we record, or are you going to stand there telling me how bad I look?" Joe opened the studio. Inside, Miles sat on a stool. He didn't have the strength to stand, and put the trumpet to his lips. The melody he discovered in the hospital bed poured out, and even weakened by illness, even playing on borrowed time, it was beautiful, haunting, like a message from somewhere between life and death. Herbie Hancock arrived 20 minutes later and stopped dead in the doorway when he saw Miles. "Miles, what the hell are you doing here?" Herbie asked. "I heard you were in the hospital. I was going to visit you this afternoon." "Change of plans," Miles said simply. "Sit down, I need you to play something under this melody." Herbie wanted to argue, wanted to call an ambulance, wanted to do anything except enable what looked like a dying man's final desperate act. But then Miles played the melody, and Herbie understood. This wasn't desperation. This was necessity. Herbie sat at the piano and listened as Miles played the melody through twice. Then, without any discussion, without any sheet music, Herbie began to play chords underneath it. The right chords. The only chords that could possibly work with that melody. "That's it," Miles said, lowering his trumpet. "That's exactly it. You feel it?" "I feel it," Herbie said quietly. "Miles, where did this come from?" "I don't know," Miles admitted. "I was lying in that hospital bed, high on morphine, dying, and I heard it. Like it was being played from somewhere else, and I was just the receiver. Does that sound crazy?" "No," Herbie said. "That sounds like music." Ron Carter arrived from the airport at noon, bass in hand. Tony Williams pulled up 15 minutes later, having driven through the night from San Francisco. Dr. Harrison arrived with oxygen tanks and an emergency medical kit, took one look at Miles, and shook his head in resignation. "You're insane," Dr. Harrison said. "Probably," Miles agreed. "But I'm insane with a trumpet, so at least it's interesting." They recorded for 6 hours. Miles could only play for 10 or 15 minutes at a time, before he needed to rest and breathe oxygen from the tank Dr. Harrison had brought. Between takes, he'd sit on the stool, eyes closed, conserving energy for the next attempt. But when he played, it was magic. Even dying, even struggling to breathe, even with his fingers cramping and his lips bleeding slightly from the effort, Miles Davis played that melody like it was the most important thing in the world. Because to him, it was. The musicians around him understood what they were witnessing. This wasn't just a recording session. This was a deathbed performance. This was Miles Davis refusing to go quietly into the darkness, insisting on creating one more time, leaving one more piece of beauty in the world before he left it forever. Herbie Hancock would later say it was the most emotional recording session of his life. "We all knew," Herbie recalled in an interview years later, "we all knew Miles was dying. We could see it. But he was so focused on getting this melody right, on making sure it was captured perfectly, that we couldn't do anything except give him everything we had." There were moments when I was crying while playing, just crying, because I knew this was the last time I'd ever play with Miles. And he was giving us this beautiful melody as his goodbye. By 6 p.m., they had it. The perfect take. The melody was captured in all its haunting beauty, with Herbie's chords providing the harmonic foundation, Ron's bass adding depth, and Tony's drums offering just enough rhythm to give it shape without overwhelming it. Miles listened to the playback with his eyes closed, oxygen mask on his face. When it finished, he opened his eyes and looked at Joe Zawinul. "That's the one," Miles said. "Don't touch it. Don't add anything. Don't fix anything. It's perfect as it is." "What do you want to call it?" Joe asked. Miles thought for a moment. "Call it The Last Miles, because that's what it is." Dr. Harrison insisted on taking Miles back to the hospital immediately after the recording was finished. Miles was too weak to argue. He'd used every ounce of strength he had left to capture that melody. "Will he make it through the night?" Vincent asked Dr. Harrison in the parking lot. "Honestly, I don't know how he made it through the day," the doctor replied. "What he just did should have been impossible. But your uncle has a habit of doing impossible things." Miles Davis returned to St. John's Medical Center that evening. The nurses were angry that he'd left, but when they saw how weak he was, their anger turned to concern. They got him back into bed, restarted the IV, and made him as comfortable as they could. But something had changed. Miles wasn't fighting death anymore. He'd done what he needed to do. He'd captured the melody. The rest could happen however it was going to happen. For the next 2 days, Miles drifted in and out of consciousness. His family came to say goodbye. Musicians who'd played with him over the decades stopped by to pay their respects. Quincy Jones visited and held Miles's hand. Herbie Hancock brought a cassette tape of The Last Miles and played it softly on a portable player beside the bed. When Miles heard it, he opened his eyes and smiled slightly. "We did good," he whispered. "We did great," Herbie replied, tears streaming down his face. On September 28, 1991, at 10:47 a.m., Miles Davis died. He was 65 years old. The official cause of death was pneumonia, respiratory failure, and stroke. But the people who'd been at Capitol Studios 2 days earlier knew the real cause. Miles Davis had used every last bit of his life force to create one final piece of music, and when he'd finished, there was simply nothing left. The Last Miles was released 3 months later as part of a posthumous compilation. Critics immediately recognized it as something special. A melody that seemed to exist outside of time, outside of genre, outside of everything except pure emotion. "It sounds like a goodbye," wrote one reviewer. "Not a sad goodbye, but a peaceful one." Like Miles was saying, "I've done what I came here to do. It's time to go." The album went platinum. The Last Miles became one of the most played jazz tracks of the 1990s. It's been covered by dozens of artists, sampled in hip-hop songs, used in movies and commercials. But nobody has ever quite captured what Miles played that day in Capitol Studios. Weak and dying, and absolutely determined to get this one last melody into the world. 20 years after Miles's death, Capitol Studios put a plaque on the wall of the recording studio where The Last Miles was created. It reads, "On September 26, 1991, Miles Davis left his deathbed to record in this room. He had 72 hours to live and used 6 of them to capture one perfect melody. This is where he chose to spend his last strength. This is where he said goodbye." Herbie Hancock was asked in a 2011 interview about that day. "People always want to know if it was worth it," Herbie said. "If it was worth Miles leaving the hospital, risking dying in the studio, using up what little time he had left. And I tell them, that question misunderstands what happened. Miles wasn't choosing between making music and living. For Miles, making music was living. The only way he knew how to be alive was to create. So those 6 hours in the studio, that wasn't him dying faster. That was him living harder than he'd lived in months." Dr. Harrison, Miles's physician, gave a similar assessment. "I've spent my career trying to give patients more time," Dr. Harrison said in a medical journal interview. "More days, more weeks, more years. But Miles taught me something important. It's not about how much time you have. It's about what you do with the time you get." He could have spent those final days comfortable and sedated in a hospital bed. Instead, he spent them creating something beautiful that will outlive all of us. As a doctor, I should disapprove. As a human being, I've never respected anything more. Vincent Wilburn Jr., who helped Miles escape the hospital that morning, keeps the original manuscript paper where he notated "The Last Miles" in a frame in his house. The notes are in his handwriting, but the melody is pure Miles Davis. "Sometimes people ask me if I have any regrets about helping him leave the hospital," Vincent said, "and I tell them no, because I saw my uncle's face when he was playing that melody. I saw him come alive in a way he hadn't been alive in the hospital. He was dying either way, but in that studio for those 6 hours, he wasn't a dying man. He was Miles Davis, and that's who he wanted to be at the end." The story of The Last Miles has become legendary in music circles. It's taught in music schools as an example of artistic dedication. It's discussed in medical ethics classes as a case study in patient autonomy. It's held up as proof that some people are simply born to create, and they'll keep creating until their very last breath. But perhaps the best tribute to The Last Miles came from an unexpected source. In 2015, a young trumpet player named Marcus Chen was dying of leukemia at age 23. His family brought him a trumpet in the hospital, and he recorded a final song on his phone. When asked why, he said, "Because Miles Davis taught me that the last thing you do matters just as much as everything you did before, maybe more. Because it's what people will remember. It's your final statement. And I want my final statement to be music." Marcus Chen died 2 days after recording his song. His family released it online, and it was viewed millions of times. In the comments, hundreds of people mentioned the last Miles, and how Miles Davis had shown them that it's never too late to create, that your art doesn't end until you do. That's the legacy of what Miles Davis did on September 26, 1991. He didn't just create one final beautiful melody. He created a template for how to face death, with defiance, with purpose, and with the absolute conviction that what you have to say matters enough to say it, even if you only have hours left to say it. Miles Davis was told he had 72 hours to live. He spent 6 of them in a recording studio, and in doing so, he proved that a life isn't measured in hours or days or years. It's measured in moments of creation, moments of beauty, moments when you do the thing you were born to do, regardless of the cost. The last Miles wasn't just a song, it was a statement. I'm dying, but I'm not done. I have one more thing to say, and I'm going to say it before I go. If this story of choosing creation over comfort, of defying death to leave one more piece of beauty in the world, of measuring life in moments instead of years, moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Share this video with someone who's afraid they've run out of time to do what they love. Have you ever done something difficult because you knew it was your last chance? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more incredible true stories about the artists who created until their very last breath.